Welcome everybody to Exploring the Ka, and I am your lovely host, Ra Castaldo. I just finished a long week of work and I'm about to head out the door, and I wanted to share with you guys this new video that I'm calling Halos and Horns, and it's inspired by the late Dr. Leo Louis Martello, who was a Strega, a Sicilian Strega, and although my family and his family's lines have different beliefs and certain things that I disagree with that he believed in, I still respect his message and I respect his life and what he fought for. And even though some of my opinions and beliefs might be different, I do appreciate his work. He died in the year 2000, and he was a really close, even best friend of my friend Lori Bruno. So, in remembrance of the life of Dr. Leo Louis Martello, I wanted to do this little bit called Halos and Horns, which is also like a chapter that he had in his book. So, I'm going to do a series of videos similar to this that has to do with symbolism and whether it's really fact or fiction. And I basically can be considered also an expert on Etruscan mythology or Etruscan history. It's something that I have been deep rooted in, and where my family gets all of their beliefs from was from Tuscany and Etruscan, and in fact this is where all the Romans got most of their knowledge from as well. In fact, the Vatican is named the Vatican because of Etruscan goddess they called Vatika. Now Vatika was the one who oversees the dead. She was the one who saw that the dead got to their appropriate realm after death. And the Etruscans also would bury their dead in the ground or on a hillside so they can watch over the ground portal, okay? So they can be above the portal and watch over as the soul leaves, goes through the portal and up through the lunar realm. And basically the crescent moon was usually described too as a female symbol, even with the Mary, and how the Mary would appear on the crescent moon. But some places considered it a male symbol. I know the Egyptian god Thoth and Khonsu were seen as the crescent moon gods, you know, and their crescent moon was their symbol. The halo that's pictured on certain saints and Mary could be a symbol for the aura, the glow of the aura body, but it also could be a carryover of the moon or the sun, you know, portal. And the crowns of kings and emperors and queens and all of this, they have this halo type thing over their head, and it's seen, I think, as either the aura or as a carryover of the sun, and the halo projects this, you know, the sun glow over them. And they say that the various spikes coming from the crown are for the sun's rays, you know. So in the Vatican Museum, I know there is a statue of Juno Sospita wearing the skin and horns of a goat on her head, and this is in the same position as those on pictures of American Indian chiefs. And the Blackfoot, which represent bison horns, and you also can see this on the goddess Hathor with her bull horns. And there are many horned muses, and Mercury is often shown with wings formed like horns on his head. There are also many who wear the crescent, you know, between the wings, like Dionysus. Was also shown horn. Horus called him the Biocorniger, which means two-horned. One of the most famous is Michelangelo's statue of Moses, depicting depicting Moses wearing horns. Now the horned Moses is something that I really want to get into right now. I got a bad mosquito bite too on my ankle. The horned Moses, it's been really controversial for many centuries. And if you go to Deuteronomy 33:17, this refers to Moses as, and various Bibles say various different translations. One saying the horns of a bull, other of a unicorn. So one Bible in Deuteronomy 33:17 says Moses, and it's quoted, "His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns like the horns of unicorns." Okay, that's what this says. So some say it's a symbol as he's taking the lead of the tribe. He's, got the horns of the tribe. But horns were universally recognized as a symbol for divinity, authority, and power. In the book Horns of Honor by Frederick Thomas Elworthy, he writes this: "The Israelites were of course quite familiar with horns upon the heads of the gods of Egypt, and fresh from the land of bondage, they would readily believe that their great lawgiver had become divine, that he had miraculously received the mark of divinity and of kingly power. The belief that Moses actually descended with solid horns upon his head was devoutly held, and has continued to be believed down to the Middle Ages. Even later, the learned Grotius says that the god Minivis, always represented with horns, who was worshipped among the Egyptians, is believed to be no other than Moses himself. Minivis was the sacred bull of Heliopolis, as Apis was that of Memphis. Spanheim lends his great authority to this by quoting Grotius, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, it's Grotius, and supports it by adding that Aben Ezra himself believed the same. He says too that Saint Jerome held fast the belief in actual horns on the head of Moses, and he, meaning Spanheim, makes his remarks seem all the more probable in establishing what was the belief of the Israelites by the production of numerous coins bearing horned heads, both bearded and beardless. A Greek one of Agrina in Sicily has a horned head, which may be either male or female, but most looks like a woman. Another of Gela has an undoubted female face. So there is a lot of evidence claiming that Moses did have actual horns on his head. I mean, that's very controversial, but it's very interesting. And, it's also said that Robert Graves alludes to both the horned Moses and Alexander the Great in his book, The White Goddess. Okay? In this book, he said that Alexander didn't sack the Temple of Jerusalem, explaining that he bowed down before the Tetragrammaton on the high priest's golden frontlet as the symbol of the God he represented, whom he saw in a dream. This convinced him that Jehovah was on his side and would lead him to victory. Grave writes, the high priest then further encouraged Alexander by showing him the prophecy in the book of Daniel, which promised him the dominion of the east, and he went up to the temple, sacrificed to Jehovah, and made a generous peace treaty with the Jewish nation. The prophecy referred to Alexander as the two-horned king, and he subsequently pictured himself on his coins with two horns. He appears in the Quran as Dhul Qarnayn, the two-horned. Moses also was two-horned, and in the Arabian legend El-Hidar, the ever-young prophet, a former sun hero of Sinai, befriended both Moses and Alexander at the meeting place of two seas. To the learned Guion, therefore, a banner born before Alexander was equally a banner born before Moses, and Saint Jerome, or his Jewish mentors, had already made a poetic identification of Alexander's horns with those of Moses. So I'm giving you so much proof that I found leading up to him having actual horns. And elsewhere, Graves describes New Grange built of stones, 50,000 of them, as a Bronze Age practice in honor of the White Goddess, which may account in part for the legends of kings housed after death in glass castles. These were covered with white quartz pebbles, and it was found in it they found 2 skeletons lying beside a central altar, stags, antlers, bones, and nothing else. This cave was rediscovered in 1699, and Grave also writes that the antlers at New Grange were probably part of the sacred king's headdress, like the antlers worn by the god Coronos, and the horns of Moses and those of Dionysus and King Alexander also shown on coins. So, I mean, I have way more here too that I can get into, and it's interesting that it's also, you know, links him with the god, the Coronos or Cern. And there's so much more other places that I found that depicts Moses with horns. I mean, I could go on and on. There's like 5 others I found. And you know, even the horned helmets were worn way before Alexander's time. You know, and you could find these in Etruscan museums and you know, all things like that. And like I said, Rome and most of the Mediterranean area got their knowledge from the Etruscans, and the Etruscans got it from the Persians, and the Persians from a star people. So understand that this goes way back. The horns are a sign of divinity to most occult cultures, and you know, this is interesting too. I don't know, I'm gonna save this for another time, but I thought you guys would find this interesting. And obviously you guys can see how I'm calling this halos and horns. And the next part I'll get more into the crowns worn and their symbolism, and even the feathers and the plumed serpents. You know, these are horns and signs of rays coming out from the portal or from the sun. And you know, it just seemed feathers and plumes are like a modified emblem of horns, and you could find them even on old pictures of the head of Osiris and the crest of the Prince of Wales, on numerous family crests, and even in Naples, in the Cathedral of San Gennaro, the famous saint whose blood is supposed to liquefy were there, where near riots recently, when the Pope, you know, when the Pope had spoke out back in the 60s or 70s, I forget, there was like riots over this, and one of the side chapels were belonging to the Minatoli family, and contains 2 sides of the lower walls painted with almost life-size knights, 21 in all. And then 12 of them are wearing double horned helmets. And then during the raids of the Aragonese lords of Naples, there were many tournaments, and each knight presented himself at the sound of the tromba, or the trumpet. And then the wearing of the trombe on a knight's head was the sign of victory, and it was either 2 horns or none at all. And in the cathedral wall, paintings, those who have none on their helmets were obviously vanquished in the tournaments. So those who were shown with the horns were those who won, and those with none were those who lost. And you know, this horn lore goes really deep, and you know, I'm not sure if Moses really had horns or not, but it was really interesting to, you know, think that it could be possible. I mean, you know, Also about that, the Cernunnos, the god Cernunnos, the horned god. You know, there was supposedly in Paris, beneath an altar, there was an altar beneath in the church. Below was like this altar to Cernunnos, and I gotta look more deep into that to see where exactly it was, so I don't misquote it. But I know for sure it was confiscated, and they were worshiping Baal and Astaroth in Paris in some cathedral. So when I get that information dug up for you, I'll go back into that. But I'm gonna say goodbye for now and spiral out.